This, too, will be my sacrifice. We're starting this explainer off with a genuinely chilling promise. It was made by a man who completely abandoned his own family to practice dark, unspeakable rituals. And it's a promise that actually set the stage for a terrifying generational curse, one that is literally still haunting his descendants today.
So let's dive right into this exploration of Bengali supernatural archives. Today, we're unpacking some absolutely wild first-hand testimonies originally from boot.com. We're going to trace a path that starts with your classic, localized atmospheric folklore, but then it spirals into some deeply disturbing, unresolved family horrors involving extreme violence. Just a quick heads up before we get into it. Some of these later accounts do deal with severe trauma and harm to children, but it is a fascinating, if heartbreaking, look at exactly how generational trauma manifests in cultural legends. Let's get into it.
All right, Section 1, the 1970 graveyard encounter, where we look at shadows in the dark.
Picture this. It's 1970, and a young student named Badal lives right near this sprawling 70-year-old graveyard that's completely overgrown with thick jungle. He's walking back late one night with a friend, and out of nowhere, they hear this terrifying sound, like a massive iron drum just rolling down the road. They look over into the dark, and they spot two unnaturally shaped men fishing in a roadside pond. But here is the really creepy part. Despite all the splashing sounds they were hearing, the water itself was dead still, no ripples at all. As the boys cautiously stepped closer, the men and the pond just vanished into smoke. And the real terrifying kicker? The next morning, they walked by the exact same spot and realized there had never been a pond there to begin with.
Panicking from what they just saw, the boys basically sprinted back and locked themselves inside their tin-roofed room. Suddenly, this violent, apocalyptic storm just erupts outside. I mean, it sounded like giant trees were being ripped out of the ground and violently thrown onto their roof. But get this, there wasn't a single cloud in the sky. Then the knocking started. The voice of their caretaker was pleading to be let in, but the voice wasn't just coming from the door. It was echoing from the roof, the windows, the walls. It multiplied into literally hundreds of voices trying to crush them. They barely survived the night, but morning revealed the absolute truth. The storm never happened, and their caretaker had been miles away at his own home the entire time.
Moving on to Section 2, a stalker in the dark.
Our next account focuses on a local mosque's muezzin. Along with leading prayers, he actually practiced spiritual healing for afflicted children. Now, what happened to him is a perfect example of a methodical, escalating haunting. The entity didn't just strike all at once. It mapped out a slow closing in over several nights. First, on a completely windless evening, a heavy brass water pot just inexplicably crashed to the floor right behind him. A few days later, he runs into a neighborhood woman weeping in the dark. Yet the next day, she swore to him she had been asleep in her bed the whole time. And then came the climax. A massive, blinding ball of light descended straight out of the sky, engulfing the muezzin with so much force that he was knocked entirely unconscious right there on the road.
So, you might be wondering, why him? Well, this wasn't a random attack at all. It was vindictive retaliation. The muezzin actually sought out his own spiritual guide to understand why he was suddenly a target, and his guide revealed something terrifying. A child the muezzin had recently cured was actually the original victim of this specific entity. By intervening, the muezzin hadn't just healed a child, he had effectively painted a massive target on his own back.
All right, Section 3, Terror in Nandigram, focusing on the cursed gab tree. So, local lore in Nandigram centers around this deeply feared gab tree, where a young woman tragically took her own life. Over the years, this single physical location became an absolute hotspot for the deadly and the bizarre. Just look at this list of incidents. 3 young boys simultaneously plummet from its branches in broad daylight for no reason. A passing fish seller inexplicably finds his basket entirely emptied, with all his fish suddenly hanging way up high in the tree's branches. Driven into some weird trance to get them back, he climbs up, falls, and actually dies of a mysterious, severe fever just days later. Other people reported seeing the entire tree completely engulfed in phantom flames, bringing on this crushing physical heaviness and overwhelming dread.
The terror, the illusions, the tragedies, they continued around that tree for decades. It literally only stopped in 2014. That's when the village finally banded together, had enough, and chopped the cursed tree down. By destroying the physical anchor of the legend, the curse was broken. It's actually a fascinating example of how collective action can completely dismantle local lore.
Which brings us to Section 4, the descent into darkness.
This is where the explainer takes a major shift.
We move away from these localized ghosts into a devastating, multi-generational nightmare for a man named Deepak. The whole thing started with his grandfather, who became what's known as a Kapalik. If you're not familiar, a Kapalik is an ascetic who meditates in cremation grounds. They sever all societal ties to practice incredibly dark rituals, seeking supernatural power and the ability to control spirits. Deepak's grandfather didn't just casually work at the cremation ground. He abandoned his family completely, living among the ashes and spiraling deep into dark mysticism.
Now, the atmospheric dread we've been talking about turns intimately devastating right here. When Deepak's parents had their very first child, the grandfather actually came for a visit. He held the baby, laughed maliciously, and openly declared the child will be his sacrificial offering. Literally that very night, the newborn vanished from his parents' bed. The family's frantic search ultimately ended at the cremation ground, and there, they discovered the absolute unthinkable. The infant's brutally sacrificed body, with the grandfather just calmly meditating right nearby. Section 5. 3 Generations of Terror. This is where the family curse truly takes hold.
Let's actually map this out on a timeline so you can see just how relentless this dark pact was. Years after that horrific sacrifice, the grandfather returned. When Deepak's father tried to defend his remaining family with a weapon, the grandfather threw a cursed ash that instantly paralyzed him, and then he vowed to take Deepak next. As a child, Deepak was tormented by this phantom burning ash poured over his body at night. And it just kept escalating. By the time he was in college, the unseen force turned physical, violently dragging him into a dark river right near the cremation grounds, nearly drowning him.
The trauma this caused was so incredibly visceral. Just listen to Deepak's own words. He said, "My body felt like it was burning with hot ash, poured by a laughing entity." Imagine that. Every single night, he felt the extreme heat of phantom ash burning his skin from his knees all the way to his feet, always accompanied by this mocking laughter. To this very day, he can't sleep at night and has to literally soak his legs in cold water just to find a fleeting moment of relief.
Finally, Section 6, the curse continues, an unresolved nightmare.
Now, you might be thinking, surely modern medicine or a high-level spiritual healer could stop this, right? Well, Deepak traveled as far as Kashmir to consult top spiritual guides, only to be told that his grandfather had bound their bloodline to an unbreakable curse. Fast forward to 2022, the systematic nature of this horror strikes again. Deepak and his wife had newborn twin daughters. Terrified of history repeating itself, they did everything they could. They filled their securely locked modern brick house with buckets and drums of water. But in the middle of the night, Deepak wakes up to find every single drop inexplicably dumped out. As he's scrambling in the dark for fresh water, his wife screams. From inside a locked room, one of their twin daughters had vanished without a trace. A complete, devastating echo of his older brother decades prior.
Years have passed, and that missing twin has never been found. And incredibly, the curse is now bleeding into a 3rd generation. Deepak's surviving 4-year-old daughter now wakes up crying in the middle of the night, begging for water to cool the phantom ash burning her own legs. It leaves us with a harrowing reality about the sheer endurance of generational trauma. Will this bloodline ever truly be free, or are some curses simply too deeply rooted to break? Thank you so much for exploring these dark archives with me in today's Explainer. Keep asking questions. I'll catch